Gutteprat, episode 2, with me, Reindeer Hot Dog, him, Atexi, and also him, Tom Dent, but not Anders Christiansen, as I might have suggested would have been the case. He's too busy doing his own thing today. Rather selfish of him, but we will press on without him. Um, First of all, what's everyone drinking? I'm going to start with James. What you
Oh
got?
goodness. A little bit more interesting at least than last week. I'm on the Lemsip this week. Saturday night concert has not put me in a good way, so just trying to keep that voice going throughout today. That's the main priority.
That's more interesting than what you had last week.
Yeah, it's something.
Well, yeah, Monster, wasn't it? And Tom, what have you got?
I have gone back to my roots today, so I have gone for a classic cuppa, and that is with milk, which most Norwegians won't understand because they don't understand how the Brits drink tea with milk.
Mm,
But I have gone for a classic cuppa just because why the hell not, really? And
yeah,
I've gone for a glimpse
No
coloured
sugar.
mug because they were the no sugar glimpse coloured mug because they were the big
Good man.
winners of this weekend.
nice. Okay, so me, you read that? Something really sweet.
Oh, Koppenberg rum and coke.
Yeah, it's a cherry flavour.
Ooh,
Gonna give it a go in
Well,
the Caribou and Crafter mug.
welcome
obviously.
back to your teenage years.
I know, right? This is one of the this is one of the drinks that me and the girlfriend will get on a weekend when we see each other. And we'll usually get like, I don't know, two or three, and we end up drinking one between us. So they just get left in the fridge. And I saw it and I was like, oh, I could definitely have that today because we're not really that big drinkers. So, but yeah,
You realise that if you keep having an alcoholic drink every time we do this, bearing in mind it's 1:30 in the afternoon where you are right now,
mm.
the whole we're not big alcohol drinkers isn't going to wash.
Yeah. You see, the thing is, I will probably drink about half of it. That's being quite honest there, to be honest. The last time we did this and I had that lager, I drank about half of it tops. So, um, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So we're looking at Run 24, which has just gone by. We're going to be going over similar things that we did last week as well. Goal, performance, assist of the week, whatever it is, we're going to be talking about it. And I'm going to kick us off by saying, much to the chagrin of Tom, what a game Kristiansund Rosenborg was. What a game.
Oh, superb.
I think it's the obvious place to jump in for
Well, can,
game of the
can I
season.
just say before we start this, I'm going to take a back seat on this one because it's not often that you have a Rosenborg fan and a Christiansen fan in the same chat. So I'm going to take a back seat. I am going to just let you two talk it out. Uh, my only comments is this: we're now 9 points clear of Christiansen and HamKam, so it was a good result for us.
Mhm.
And Glimt are now second in the table, so it was a good result for my old club. That's all I'm going to say. Crack on, you two.
Yeah. Well,
I
I've
I
watched.
honestly think, given the scoreline at half time, especially, that we're probably both quite happy with the end result.
Well, I mean, I was under no illusions that it was going to be a close game. I predicted it would be 2-2. Obviously, I didn't predict 4-4 or 3-0, but I saw a draw, as we said last week.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I don't think anyone thought Christensen had 4 goals in their locker against Rosenborg. Like, that
I,
is just crazy.
no,
Obviously, a little bit of help from Sam Rogers, but
oh, you can't be blaming Sam Rogers for that. Bloody
no, you
hell.
can't.
He came on for like, in the second half, and yeah, his own goal was an unfortunate one, really.
It was.
I'm happy to say that I've criticised him this season, and I think fairly. I don't think I've gone out of my way to, create some sort of witch hunt or, you know,
Oh, no.
be unjustly against him. And then he has had some great performances as well. The thing is, I'm not sure what else he's meant to do in that situation. If he lets it run, then that's a tapping for Ulverstad.
Yeah.
He needs to get something on it to try and move it away from the goal. It's one of those things where sometimes he comes across a bit Harry Maguire or Phil Jones. Like we know that he's capable of more than what he shows, but then he'll do something which just makes it easy to criticize him because of the way that he does it. And I think
Yes.
that doesn't help him. Um, but I mean, I always thought it'd be a tough game. Yeah, I never envisaged going to Kristiansund and picking up the 3 points just because our away form this season. And I really do feel like a lot of people tend to neglect home form and away form when it comes to analysing games and teams and that. And like we said last week, there seems to be some issue with us away from home. And I think it is a mental thing. So I think this result is actually really, really, really promising. And it sounds ridiculous to say that when we've conceded four. But the thing is, we were 3-1 down, and we were going to win that game 4-3 until that unfortunate own goal.
Yeah,
So in
it could
terms of
have
mental
gone a hell of
strength,
a lot worse for you.
we've shown that we have the resilience to jump into that and attack it and not shy away from trying to get back into the game. And I think going forward is a massive, massive thing. And you've got to remember as well, Kristiansund are fighting for their lives. They're fighting for
Yeah,
their lives. I could see them scoring four past anybody just because that may be what they need to do. And I think they're the kind of team that is showing week in, week out lately that they're not going down without a fight. And you look at the home form, unbeaten in what, four now? 3 games in a row they've won, and then obviously drew with us last week.
yeah.
But I
At
mean,
home, horrible place to go right now. Horrible place to visit. And it's good to see that different people are stepping up different weeks. Like obviously, Pemi's been in fantastic form recently on the score sheet more often than not. He gets injured on 16 minutes, and then it's down to Cartum, down to Bai to come off the bench and grab a goal and an assist. They both had fantastic games and both stepped up to the big occasion. And that's exactly what we need from those sorts of players.
yeah, I think Schneider Nielsen as well put in a really good shift.
He did, yes.
We saw last season that he was really, really good. Came into this season with a lot of expectation around him. Hasn't lived up to that, but he put in a shift. And I think, to be honest with you, I know it's a 4-4 and you can criticise the defenses on both sides, but it's like the majority of players in that game had a decent game.
Yeah.
And I watched it live on Sunday, and when we were 3-1 down, I just sort of sat there and I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna have to watch the second half now. I'm not one to give up a hard time, and I'm glad that I didn't find myself something else to do rather than carry on watching. But the thing is, we were pulled apart so easily in that first half. It was insane. And the second half, I actually tweeted what I would do with the subs. And Rekdal did exactly the same, though he brought on Skjelbred rather than Vecchia. And I imagine that's to do with it's borderline tactical and borderline Vecchia's fitness. Um, so that was like we were watching the same
Yeah.
game, which is good. But it's one of those things where we said it before about Renzo Giampaoli looking good at left centre back. Really didn't have a good game at all. Didn't have a good time of it whatsoever. And I know the goals tended to come more on the other side. Like for example, Henriksen and Dalreiten on a couple of occasions didn't really communicate very well. But taking off Renzo was the right call. Just unfortunate that he brings on Rodgers and he gets an own goal because that'll obviously be talked about as being a poor substitution for whatever reason. Um, but I think one of the most important things from that game for me is that we've got Skjelbred, who technically I think is one of the better players in the league. And yeah, I know he's getting on a bit and his age might go against him playing 90 minutes or starting most weeks, but to have a player like him of his caliber to come off the bench and come into a team when we're down multiple goals and to just sort of steady the ship, it's massively, massively underrated and it's undervalued. And I think that was a big reason as to why we did what we did in the second half. And obviously Casper Tengstedt's brilliance um,
Oh,
was
he was
was another
sensational.
thing.
The amount
We'll
of
say that
times
every
that I've
week.
watched back that goal,
Mm,
his second goal was just absolutely outrageous. I've
yeah.
been watching that and off Keir's back all
Mm.
weekend, all day yesterday, just going, these just absolutely sensational. Beautiful strikes.
Yeah, I just noticed Tom pulled a little face there. Don't worry, Tengstedt isn't my goal of the week this week. So
Oof.
I didn't say anything. I did
yeah,
not
I
say a
can.
word.
Mhm,
And believe me, there was no one shouting more when he scored the 3-3 goal and the
mhm.
2-3 and the 3-3 goals. No one cheering more than I was at that moment in time,
Yeah, no, I can
given
imagine.
the table situation.
Yeah,
So don't
yeah,
misunderstand me. He has been I wouldn't say a phenomenon because I wouldn't say he's that good, but for whatever Rosenborg paid for him in the summer, it's more than been value for money.
yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So who are you having for goal of the week this week?
Goal of
If
the week
not
for me.
Tengstedt?
So goal of the week for me is Vikman. What a bloody goal that was. That was just insane. I did have off gear because I was watching the Sarpsborg game, the HamKam game, kind of at the same time, and I was watching obviously the Rosenborg game later on, and off gear's goal was ridiculous. Like the technique, that was one of
Yeah.
those where where he's hit that perfectly, got it in off the post. Christiansen's got absolutely no chance of saving that. That was just ridiculous. And I felt for him. I was like, I saw that going and I thought, oh, he's going to be annoyed at that because that is just too far away from him and it's hit the post and beautiful. Tengstedt's goal was like, I'm not too sure many keepers saved that the way that he's hit it. I know we're talking about, oh, it's the Eliteserien, it's given the space and the keepers aren't as good, blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking if he did that, the majority of keepers would have a hard time saving it. But the Vikman goal, that was just, context of the game, like they were trying to get back into the game. Obviously, they lost 2-1. But the way that it's come to him, and he's just hit that across goal, and Yendel's just got no chance of saving it. I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant goal.
I thought Yendel put in a great shift in that game,
he
but
did,
there was
yeah.
no way he's saving that.
Oh, he did. He had a really good performance, which is good for multiple reasons, fantasy-wise. But yeah, and that sort of ties in nicely with my result of the week as well. But obviously, we'll talk about that in a bit more depth later on. But I think HamKam winning 2-1. There's no Tom Dent bias, don't worry. If anything, I'd like to find ways to, take the mick a little bit. But I think in terms of context of all the other results in the league, I think that was a really, really important one. And to actually, masterclass by Malgavis. But yeah, so yeah, goal of the week for me was Vikman, just because of how it came to him, how he's put it across the goal, and he's just left the goalkeeper with no chance. What about you, James? What are you going with?
I'm sticking with Tengstedt. I mean, I was between him and Ofkir with Vikman a close third. I had Engvals up there as well. I thought the way he opened up his body and put that onto his right foot and managed to still put it away, I thought that was fantastic composure from him.
No mention of Malgavis. Malgavis' second was insane. That was a fucking gorgeous goal. That was a gorgeous goal.
They were great goals. But that's where I ended it. And I saw Tengstedt and Ofkir's goals, and I was like, I don't think the satisfaction of them I could put above the rest. And after watching them both back over and over, I'm putting Tengstedt above purely because he had alternative options. And the way he took that ball from out wide beats the defender and then makes that decision that it is the time to shoot from there, which very few occasions where that is the correct decision. Whereas Ofkir was more of just obviously technique fantastic, as you said, but he's just leathered that.
Yeah.
I found Tengstedt's more satisfying, more controlled, more decision-based. So, yeah, I stuck with Tengstedt.
Like the thing is as well, I would go as far as saying that Vetlesen is up there for goal of the week as well. And the thing is, you won't see why I say that on the replay because the replay only shows you the match camera angle. It doesn't actually show you the other angle where he puts that near post when he has absolutely no reason to do so. And it just completely stupefies the keeper. And the keeper's like, what on earth? And actually, you and I were talking about it, weren't we, Tom? When it went in, and that goal was just stupid. That was ridiculous. And the replay that you get on the Eliteserien website doesn't show you that angle, which is really annoying because it makes it a bit harder to talk about unless you've actually seen it. But the way that he sort of like curls it and just slots it on the ground in that little slot, the keeper's not expected to go there, and I don't think that you would. He's just, and it's just mad the way that he's picked it up outside the area, runs it forward a little bit, and then just does that. That's all in his head so quickly. Whereas a lot of other whereas a lot of other players, I would imagine, would have wanted to put the laces through that and shoot across goal. That's what I'd imagine would be the most common way to approach that situation. Malgavis's volley as well, just ridiculously nice. There's been some amazing goals. There really has. And I think maybe technique and in terms of other players scoring it, probably Vetlesen is the best. Tengstedt in terms of context, in terms of finish, up there as well. Malgavis with the volley. I think the reason why I haven't put Malgavis as top is because I think other players could do that as well. As good as it was, it looks more like one of those goals that, you just sort of connect with, and maybe 9 times out of 10 you completely, you know, mishit it, but then you will get
Yeah.
that one time when you hit it nicely and it goes in. But that was a beautiful goal. And I really think this week was really, really difficult to choose goal of the week. Raffin's goal as well reminded me of Ericsson from last week, the way that he picked it up out wide, cut inside, and then
Yeah.
curled it in. Then you've got Sander as well, really nice volley in the area. Wallum as well. I know that ball was ricocheting around in the area, but he's running wide. He's running past the ball, notices it stops, it gets blocked behind him, has to track back almost instantly, reposition himself, and he's just smacked it in the roof of the net. So there've been some really, really, really good goals, but I think Vikman for me just made me think, oh, I really like that one. So
Yeah,
that's
for
why I went
sure.
with that one. Yeah.
What are you saying there, Tom?
I had said my original thing was Melgovis, because I think that you can talk about that. Okay, he's going to scuff 9 out of 10, but one he'll get the good connection.
Mm.
If you look back to the last time HamKam played Yav at Levmira, it was literally a carbon copy. The only difference is Melgovis puts it in the other corner instead of the near post, and I think it what makes that goal so difficult to score is that the left back is actually quite close to him.
Yeah.
In both of them. So it's one thing the cross comes in. It's another thing he has to slightly readjust, because I think that it's quite a loopy cross from Shirkovol. But then to be able to see the position of the defender and put it in the area of the goal that's open then, and get a good connection in all of about a second, is extremely difficult. So I think off Kears was the most aesthetically pleasing, because it's with power and it's the angle of it,
and the way that it hits the
and
post
where
and
it
bounces it in.
finishes,
Yeah,
I'd say that's fair.
I think that's the most aesthetically pleasing. But for sheer difficulty, I would say Marius, but then I'm biased.
Well, I mean, it was up there for me, and I could have given. I genuinely think if either of you or I mentioned any of the goals that I briefly talked about as being the goal of the week, I could understand every reason for why they'd be, put forth anyway. So,
for sure.
We were spoiled this week with goals. Pretty much the majority of the goals that I saw were top quality. So, it was a very, very hard decision. And I think, as I've said before, as I said already, HamKam to Yev 1 was my result of the week. Just contextually speaking, it was a game that you had to win. You had to win that game. You need as many points as you can now to avoid the relegation playoff, which is called, what's that word that you were?
The Qualic.
The Qualic. Qualic.
You have a Operiks Qualic promotion playoff and the Nedrix Qualic relegation playoff. But most people, if you just say Qualic, most people know which end of the table you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a huge game, and you were favourites going into it, and I actually predicted 2-1. So very, very, very nice of you to, give me a perfect prediction there. That's wonderful. But as well, that combined with Sandfield dropping points, Kristiansund dropping points, is a really, really big win, and that sets you up really nicely to avoid the qualic, as much as I thought was already going to happen anyway. In terms of resting everybody at HamKam in Hamar, that's gone a long way. So I think, plaudits where plaudits are due. That's a really good result.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, as you say, it's one thing. It's one thing playing a team around you. You have to get something, because everyone can see the table. We'd be lying if we said that we didn't understand the importance of it. And I think as well, the Kristiansund experience, where we lost 1-0, we were the first team to lose to Kristiansund all year. It hurt a lot at the time, because we felt that we didn't perform that day, and Kristiansund deserved to win. but it meant then that our focus going into this game then was probably right and better.
Yeah.
Than, you could look at all the statistics against Yao. They haven't won away all season. They're averaging 2 goals against per game at the moment. They've only won, 5 games this season or 4 games this season, but 3 of those were in the first 7 rounds. So, there's lots of statistics to say that we should have won, but we're at the time of the season now where football
doesn't
isn't
matter.
played on paper.
Yeah,
Football
exactly.
isn't, there will be results that raise eyebrows between now and the end of the season, which means that as much as it's very nice to say that we will avoid the qualic, I think the reality is nobody knows. We have Mulder this week away. They can win the league if results go their way.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
Sandefjord have Glimt away, and you don't know which Glimt team is going to come back from London. They play Arsenal obviously Thursday.
Yeah.
And then, we have Sandefjord to play in 4 games time.
Massive game. Massive game.
I think a lot will be decided then. I don't think anything will be decided before that. Because I think that, like you say, Sandefjord, they have to play Yao in between those in those 4 games as well at home. So I think that there's too much to be decided now. I think Orlesen was my result of the week, because as much as our result was important, I think they were on a knife edge now in terms of which way they were going to go. They haven't won recently that much either. They beat obviously Godse a few rounds ago, but that was their first win they've won 1 in 13 before that or something, while actually not playing that bad in my opinion. I think they've played relatively well and probably deserve more points than they've got. So I think there's still too much to happen. But for us, obviously the mood yesterday was a lot happier. The mood after the game was a lot happier. And we have that. People have talked about we've lost more games without Eriksson than we have with Eriksson. That's a fair assessment. I think what people ignore is that we've now nearly won as many games without Eriksson as we have with Eriksson. So we were on the right path, but we've still got work to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you should mention the Orlesen game, because that I found it difficult to choose between that one and the HamKam game, because like you said, I wasn't expecting the Orlesen win in that game. I thought Viking were slight favourites. I was expecting a much better performance from the away side, and yeah, when that result came in 2-1, I was a little bit like, that's actually a very, very nice result for the reasons that you said. Orlesen, they're very stop-start at the moment, far more stop than start. And that's kind of, going to allow them to finish the season relatively comfortably. Although, hilariously, Ibia, just, talking about fantasy for a brief second, brought him in for that game just to try and hit the ground early with Orlesen, because they've got a run of games now where I think they should be favourites in the majority of them. Doesn't even have a shot in his entire performance against Viking. So that was wonderful. Yeah,
you tell me that game's finishing 2-1 and a BA's blanked. Like, that's not 2 things I'd have put in the same sentence. I found that surprising. My result of the week is one that you haven't mentioned, to be fair, and I understand why Chris hasn't mentioned it, because he called it on the nose. But me and Tom were saying last week that we weren't so sure that Glimt would take the 3 points against Lillestrøm. Thought they might struggle a bit, thought that injuries might cause a bit of an issue. Obviously, turns out Pellegrino started and Vetlesen came off the bench, and both played fantastically. But similar to the vein you two went down last week with Rosenborg as your result of the week, the battle for second is obviously hotting up right now. And for Glimt to go to Lillestrøm and win in such dominant fashion, I think that's going to be a huge thing for them. Obviously, going into that big European tie this in midweek, Esbjord getting another goal, his form's hotting up, and with Salverson struggling to find his feet, that's going to be a big factor. I think just all elements of that game came together for a very nice result for Glimt. Could prove to be a very important one.
But let's start a debate here, because we talked about it last time. I mean, I don't know how many bad luck charms Lillestrøm have struck the last 3 weeks or so, but it's bad enough having one clearly obvious goal against you against Rosenborg.
I know what you're going to say.
And everyone goes, oh, that's unlucky, or how the referees missed that. For it then to happen the very next game, at a very crucial point, because it was 1-1 at that time, and I would say up until 2-1, I would say it was hanging in the balance. I would say both teams looked like they could get a second. Both teams were sort of, I would say, relatively in control of each other. I think that Glimt had spells in the first half where they showed what they were good at, but didn't really come to the big chances. I thought Lillestrøm was starting to cause some problems, particularly when Glimt were a little bit open at times. But the fact of the matter is that's 2-1 goals offside by 2 or 3 meters. So the big question is it? Well, we discussed it a little bit after the game. VAR, discuss.
So
I mean,
I'm just gonna jump in here and say, I agree with that assessment in the sense of you look at Glimt's first goal, that comes from a free kick. Pellegrino whips that into the box, Saltness heads it in. 1-1, half time. And then it's just actually seen here, I forgot it was that early in the second half as well. 52nd minute, that Espejord goal goes in. So Lillestrøm have gone from being all pumped up from getting back into the game literally minutes later, going into half time thinking, right, okay, let's just settle and approach this second half like we know we can. Let's just be calm and let's just look to, try and regain a bit of control. 7 minutes in, they've got a ridiculous decision go against them. Pellegrino smashes it into the box, and Espejord, again, like you said, is just notably offside. It's impossible to miss. I don't see how you can miss it. He's clearly goal side of that defender as well. It's not even like it's like a borderline thing. It's so obvious, just like the 10-step one, obviously not to the same degree because that was on another level. But yeah, so early on in that second half that to happen, and it's just absolutely killed it. And then the next big difference was Vetlesen. Yeah, like I know Pellegrino's got two assists and scored a goal. Vetlesen was the catalyst for that game to end the way that it did. And I think, he's just that kind of player. He's come on and he's just, he's done a hell of a lot of work in a short amount of time to just put that game to bed. And I think VAR is needed. Now, the thing is, I've had this discussion historically about VAR coming to the Eliteserien. And I think the biggest issue for me is the cost of it, because I don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. I know it's up there in terms of relative cost for this league. It seems quite expensive. I think it's a needed investment, but at the expense of funding grassroots football at a lower level in Norway, it just seems like a bit of a poor trade-off, in my opinion. And the thing is, VAR isn't going to help unless we have referees who are competent enough to use it correctly. And I think we've seen that in the Premier League. The application of VAR in the Premier League sometimes is laughable. And it's not because of VAR, and people misunderstand what VAR actually is, and then you get all these people on Twitter debating about, graphics and like lines and who's offside, and then they infer the offside rule incorrectly in terms of, when they're given that 5 yards of grace, all of this sort of thing. So I don't think it's going to help too much in terms of fans' interpretation and enjoyment of the game, but I think it's a step in the right direction. But please, can we actually get these officials trained on how to use it properly and more effectively? Because the way that it's been used in England is just awful, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Like the concept of VAR as a whole, when it was introduced, obviously there was a lot of frustrations with it, but the majority of them were down to the refereeing and the officiating behind it. Like the VAR is there to provide help at the end of the day, and it does do that. But if you're not going to use that correctly, in the same way that if you just got a replay of it without all the graphics and all the lines and the vibrating watch and all of that. Like, that's obviously an older thing now. But if none of that works well, and if the referee's not competent enough to use it correctly, then it completely defeats the point. Like, the proportion of decisions you're getting right as a result of having VAR isn't necessarily going to be greater if you're going to misinterpret what it's actually trying to communicate.
And I think as well, like, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Tom, but the whole clear and obvious error loophole. Yeah.
I think I mean, first thing I will say about referees is that I actually think the referee we had against Yov was one of the best we've had this season, because I think he was very common sense minded. You know, he understood the size of the game. He let things go when it needed to go. He applied the advantage rule well. I know Scal got booked in the first half, but he didn't. He played the advantage and then went back and booked him. He got the big calls correct, and he was for both sides wasn't able to be influenced one way or another.
Yeah.
Because of course in the heat of the moment we all think one thing or the other.
Sure. Yeah.
So there are good referees that exist in Norway. That is a fact.
Oh yeah, I
no,
I
but it's just
I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't.
I know, but it's just to have it said, because when you have the referee chat, it's very easy to put everything under the same blanket and actually forget then the positive side to it.
Yeah.
My thing with VAR is it stands in the initials that it's the video assistant referee.
Yeah.
So for me, the best way to use it is how they use it, like they do in cricket, which is the referee makes a decision, and the VAR people then look to see if it's an obvious mistake. And obvious has to be objective. It can't be a subjective kind of, what is it or isn't it?
That's what I was getting at.
Obvious mistake.
Yeah.
And if it's an obvious mistake, you change the decision. And if it's not an obvious mistake, if it's one that we can have three people in this podcast discuss and we all don't agree, then just let the referee make that decision. Yeah. You know, that's the gist of it. Offside is a black and white thing.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
There can be no discussion on an offside, whether it's a toenail or if it's a whole foot.
Yeah.
If he's offside, he's offside. Now, people will say, "Oh, well, you know, do we want to be refereeing to that nth degree?" Well, it doesn't matter really. At the end of the day, you're offside, you're not offside. That's the rules. But things like penalties, things like tackles, it's like you see there was a couple of tackles at the weekend in the Premier League that were applied to VAR. One, I think it was the Caribou and Fulham, was initially given a yellow and then was given a red.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the same for the Tottenham wing back against Arsenal as well.
Emerson Royale, yeah.
It was the same thing for him. Now, I don't know. You know, you look at the TV pictures, the tackles look bad. So whether it's defined as red or not, I don't know. But I would also go over the argument and say that if you look at a tackle on TV in slow-mo or in something like that, they tend to look worse than they actually are. And that's, I think, a dangerous precedent to set. Yes, I'm all for player safety. Yes, I'm all for protecting the players, because I feel like some players like Grealish and Saka and those guys don't get enough protection sometimes. But I think that referees have to be allowed to referee first, and then the VAR should be there to fix any, as stated, clear and obvious mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well, about the referees being allowed to continue as actual referees, you know. And I think there has to be an expectation that a referee, any single referee in any single fixture, is not going to get 100% of decisions correct. And is that not okay? Like, you know, like they will obviously strive to be as infallible as possible, but, you know, sometimes they're going to make the wrong call for whatever reason or infer situations slightly differently. It's just, I think everything gets magnified because you have people online who will take the frustrations out on these officials, on the game. And, you know, if they've lost the game, for example, like 2-0 and a couple of calls went against them, then it's magnified and everything becomes just so myopic. Everyone, that's all that they can see. It's just those mistakes. And I think that's where it becomes more of an issue. And I don't know whether that's the case with managers or management staff or whatever. I'm not saying that it is, but I think it's very, very easy psychologically to have more attention drawn to mistakes, especially if the result doesn't go your way. And as well, let's say it's Man United at home against Fulham, and Fulham should have a clear penalty, and they don't get it, and Man U win 1-0. Then it's a case of Man U never get any decisions go against them at Old Trafford, and it's just a complete logical fallacy to say that just because it's another mistake gone, unchallenged, all that sort of thing. Whereas, the same could be said away from home for Man United, or actually this season they might have conceded more poor referee mistakes. It's just very, very easy for people to jump on the latest mistake and magnify it out of all proportion to the context in which it happened. And I hope when we've got VAR that will sort of eradicate all of those issues. And I just want to clarify one thing as well. Earlier, I said about the leeway for being offside, and I think I said 5 yards, and I meant 5 centimeters, because obviously 5 yards is just ridiculous to be offside by and to be allowed. So I can't remember if I said yards, but I think I might.
You did, yeah.
And I was like,
I
was like, thanks for correcting me, both of you. You're just like, yeah, we're just going to
I
leave
was like,
that there.
it's so wrong that it's
fine.
obviously wrong.
But yeah, bit of a brain fart there for me. But yeah, obviously I meant the 5 centimeters or whatever it is in the Premier League. So yeah, I think we're all in favour of it, but it needs to be implemented in such a way where it's going to get the results that we want, rather than just throwing it in and seeing what sticks. Just sort of throwing it in without any real guidelines, without any training, and then just saying, oh, by the way, don't worry about it. I think that would be awful, and hopefully it's utilised correctly in a way that's going to better the league. I'm thinking performance of the week. I've got multiple for this. Again, I've got multiple for this. You look at the Kristiansund Rosenborg game, you've got Caribou and Tengstedt, who are both ridiculous, both really, really good. Tengstedt will obviously take more of the plaudits because, he got 2 goals with the 1 assist rather than Caribou with just 1 of each. But my performance of the week actually goes to somebody not involved in that game, Jakub Storovic for Sandefjord. I thought he was the reason Sandefjord didn't lose that game. And Sarpsborg should have won that game. They had enough chances. They weren't really firing on all cylinders, and it was quite frustrating as a Heinz-owner in terms of fantasy. But that's another story. But I watched that game and I thought, oh God, this is like Tromsø against Molde. Like, they were their own worst enemies. They should have not lost that game. Molde weren't brilliant in that game at all. But the thing is, Tromsø just didn't do anything. They were very, very sloth-like in their attacking play. And Mikkelsen so far ahead of everyone else. Like, the way that he computes football, all that information is just, it's absolutely insane. And I think that game really, really highlighted just how far ahead he is of his peers. They just couldn't keep up with him. They really, really couldn't keep up with him. So I think it was one of those games for Sarpsborg where they'll look back at that and think, yeah, we really should have won that game. Like, we did more than enough to win that game. But I think Storovic just played one of those games where he was like, you know what, we're not going to lose this game. And he made a couple of really good saves. He made 6 saves in total, 4 in the area, and 12 recoveries as well. Denied almost 2 post-shot expected goals. We're talking about a really, really good performance here. And I think it probably won't get too much recognition because of everyone else with how they played this week. And I think objectively you could say, okay, Carton, Tengstedt, whatever, Leuni, all had amazing, amazing games. But I'm going to draw attention to him just because I think that actually in the context of that result, Sandefjord lose that game, you win yours. That's absolutely damaging. So to salvage a point in that game, however unlikely it looked, I thought was really, really good. And it was because of his performance.
Yeah, I do really like that pick, and to bring attention to someone like that's perhaps like out of clear view this week. I think that's really important to do. For myself, I was going to keep it boring stick it with Tengstedt because I think he was absolutely sensational. Obviously played a key role in turning that game on its head. Excellent goal that had my goal of the week. An assist that was one of my contenders for my assist of the week as well, which we'll get onto in a bit. But also, I think a fair contender could be Vetlesen.
Yeah.
Played 17 minutes, goal, assist, 4 key passes. He could have had 2 more assists. Like the chances he created for Pellegrino and Salverson, they're both 50-50s. I could easily have seen that game's finish 6-1 and them both scoring those goals.
In the heat of the moment,
if they had, I'd have had it. I'd have had him as player of the week.
See, in the heat of the moment, I was like, how has Salverson not done better with that chance? Watched it back and I was like, that really wasn't a chance. The ball was a really, really awkward position for him. He's had to get back and get underneath it. It was never going in. But I do take your point that Vetlesen created a hell of a lot in that game in a very, very short amount of time when it was 2-1 as well. He's come on and he's basically ensured the 3 points for Glimt. It was a really, really good performance. Absolutely. Who are you going with, Tom?
I'm being a bit of a nerd, not a nerd. I'm being a bit of a coach about it. So again, there's been plenty of good performances. You can look at Magnus, of course, with 2 goals. You can look at Tengelbelt, 2 goals.
Yeah.
Sander Carterman, who I had he's from Stjørdal, so I had him in Stjørdal, I think.
I do like
many
Carter.
Years ago.
Big fan.
But actually, the one I'm going for is a bit of a left field one, but bear with me. And that's Breivik from Molde.
Oh, yeah, I can understand why.
And there's 2 reasons for it. Number one, to be so young, to play out of position, to play against a team that had a relatively amount of ball and solve it so masterful as he did. I think he was excellent without the ball and his understanding. And also then, secondly, his abilities on the ball to progress the ball, keep the ball moving, know when to support, know when to drop off, know when to play forward, know when to just control the game a bit more. I thought he had a really, really good game with all things considered. If he's been, I think Bjornbak had a good game as well. But I think just for being thrown in there, the big question before the game was, are Molde going to stick with 3 at the back? Are they going to change it around, etc., etc.? They went with 3 at the back, went with Breivik as one of the 3, and I thought he solved it. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I actually messaged you during that game and I was like, I swear Breivik's one of the best players we've had in this league for a while. He could play anywhere. You could put him in goal and he'll be decent as far as I'm concerned. I genuinely think as an out footballer goes, he is insane. It's just the way that he computes the game, sort of like Mikkelsen, but in terms of he's a bit more of a generalist in the sense of you can put Breivik in the back 3, you can put Breivik in a central midfield position. You can put Breivik more attacking midfield, and he's going to do well. He's chipped in with a few assists this season in Europe and in the league. Defensively, he was incredible. The amount of recoveries that he made in that game, he really didn't stop running. He tried to get the ball back at every opportunity that presented itself. He is one of those kind of players, and it's sort of like he makes me think of a better version of Vahinen. So when he was at Stabæk, I thought he was one of the most out and out footballers that we had in the league at the time. And of course, I think he's is he at Salernitana now or someone like that? I think he's in Syria. When we had him in the league, it was a case of, okay, I think he's going to go. And then he left, and Stabæk they were another team without him. They were they were so weakened by his departure. And I think you can't really make the same case for Molde because they have such strength in depth. But I think a lot of talk this season has been about Mansverk, who has also been quality, and he's got I imagine his reputation in Norway has increased hugely since the start of this season. But yeah, I think Breivik, I don't know whether he's going under the radar in Norwegian circles, but every single week I'm just like, okay, stats back up another good performance. If I watch the highlights or watch the game, Breivik's usually in and around where the ball is, is getting involved. So yeah, I think that was a really, really good performance, and it baffled me, and it's actually really annoyed me because in fantasy he hasn't even got 1 bonus point in that game.
Yeah,
which
I was just about to say
just
that.
Baffling. I was like, you haven't watched the same game as me. Bjornbach was given all 3. Brynildsen was given 2, which I just found baffling. He scored a goal and was all right, but he didn't really do that much. I mean, if we're going to give bonus points for winning goals, let's have a separate category for that, because there's no way that he deserved 2 bonus points. But yeah, Breivik was completely shunned by the bonus system. And I know that's not exhaustive, but that sort of backs up my idea that I do think Breivik probably doesn't get the recognition that he does deserve on a regular basis.
Then the thing is, though, and then it'll come back to it in a later point when we start doing our top 5s. I think a lot of it comes down to the position he plays as well. It's very hard to stand out in a position. He's obviously usually a midfielder. And Corsa's got a lot of goals this season from midfield. I think he's got 6 or 7 now.
Yeah.
So he's sort of been brought forward because of that. You talked about Mansverk earlier. He's always been registered in Norway as a top talent. He was playing for Sogndal as a 16-year-old and was absolutely bossing games in the league below. So it's an easy one for him to be followed. But sort of, you have to remember Breivik, his debut came against Granada in the last 16 of the Europa League last year or something ridiculous. That was his first start for Molde in a European knockout game, and he was very, very good. I can't remember if he was voted man of the match, but he was certainly. Everyone sort of, okay, why is he starting? And then everyone after the game went, okay, that's why he's starting.
Yeah.
Whereas I think this year he's been a lot more regular. But when you have, like say, Corsa scoring goals, you have Mansverk has been, is he in the under 21 squad or is he not in the under 21 squad? Ericsson was bought for big money. Hussein's been there for such a long time. He sort of gets lost a little bit because he doesn't score many goals, even though he scored a brilliant goal against Glimt a few weeks back. He doesn't get the same recognition, I think.
No, I agree. And it's a shame, but I think he will be seen as a better player as we go forward. But like you say, there's probably less opportunity for him to build up his reputation because of the position that he plays and the other players in that team that are already established as top talents. Right, I think we just push on to if we've all got one really quickly, get through the assist of the week. For me, it was Jorgensen for Gyengar's goal. Just the way that he picks up the ball in the final third and then just flicks it through the defender's legs with the outside of his foot straight into his path, and it's a lovely finish. I just thought that was a really, really nice play by Jorgensen. And I think he's showing that this season that he actually can play a slightly more advanced role rather than just thinking of him as this central midfielder, sort of like number 6, sort of, player. I think he can get forward. And he's showing that he is somebody that can do a bit of both. And I think that assist was really, really good.
Just have I said, I don't have one, so
that's right.
I'm out, as they say on Dragons Den. I'm out.
For me, it's very similar to my assist I gave last week. I'm giving it to Cartum. It was partly bad defending that was responsible, but gave it to Euclid last week. Beat 4 men down the left-hand side, pulled back a beautiful ball off balance, and got the assist as a result. I think it's hard to look past that. Yeah. Also, special mentions for Tengstet's vision for the opener to find Cornic. I really like Saltvet's weighted ball for Engvall from deep. I think that was perfectly weighted. And Jakob Eng's cross through the legs of one defender perfectly to find Launi at the back post. I think that was superb.
I guess we come on to the top 5 section for this week, and that is top 5 underrated or underappreciated players in the league. And obviously, we have just mentioned Breivik there, but I think there are some huge examples of those kind of players. And I think why don't we start with our 5th choice and work up to our top choices? I think that's what we'll do this week.
You did say we had a rank order.
Sorry.
Come back to me. I need to juggle my order.
So I'll start us off. I'm going with somebody who had another really good game. He's actually played quite well this season. He probably deserves a bit more credit, but then again, I don't live in Norway, so I don't know in terms of the media just how well he's been received. But Yildirim Ibrahimaj, I just think his consistency is one of those things that people maybe overlook when we talk about these kind of players. And give me 1 second. Hang on, I've lost my sheet here. I got rid of it. So if you look at him, so chances created this season, he actually ranks 4th in the league, 47, and that's top for Lillestrøm. Only 3 players in the league have got more. This similar sort of thing with assists, 6 assists, 2nd for Lillestrøm, 6th in the league. Scores goals as well, only 4, but again, to have a player who's good at both creating and scoring some goals is relatively rare, and I think that really shows how good he is at both of those things. And he likes to dribble as well. 2nd best in his team for dribbles this season. But I think more than that, it's just the way that he maybe isn't going to grab all the headlines, but he comes on the pitch and he plays and he puts in the performance the majority of the time. And he actually was one of the players that I picked out earlier on in the season as, are we ignoring him in fantasy? And I think he's definitely responded to that with a yes, you probably are ignoring me when you shouldn't be. And I think he's one of those players that I think probably deserves a little bit more recognition.
5th for me might be a bit controversial to put on an underrated players list, given he's got a decent reputation in the Eliteserien, but it's not someone we talk about so much. I've gone for Marius Højbråten of Glimt.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason that he's the man who's the mainstay in that centre-back position this year. Obviously, Amundsen, Mo, and now Lurder obviously sharing minutes both in the league and in Europe. But Højbråten's defensive ability, topped off with his ability to just control the ball across the back. The amount of passes he's played this season, he sits 3rd for final third passes in the league.
He's top in the league, isn't he?
For opposition half passes. Yeah, he's 400 passes clear as top passes in the league. And with great accuracy as well. I think he's just so important to that Glimt build-up play, even though he's never going to be getting the goal or the assist unless he's heading down from a set piece. I think he is crucial to the system that they play, and I think he does his job absolutely fantastically. I think he lacks the credit he deserves.
I have him on my list. He was number 2 on my list.
I almost had him on mine.
And I think that the thing you have to remember with Højbråten is the first thing is the first year they won the league, he played more games, I think, than both Brede Mol and Marius Lule, but never got the same credit as either one. It was always the Brede Mol and Marius Lule pair up was always compared to the Puyol and PK of the classic 2009 Barca team, where Brede Mol would always keep Marius Lule on the leash, and Lule was never the same player when Brede wasn't to the side of him, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But Højbråten was always the 3rd choice, and he was always being, left back. He was left central defender. He was always being moved wherever. Just got on with his job. And now this year, Brede Mol had a fantastic season last year. This year, Marius Lule left before he came back. Mol's been injured for a lot of the time. So Højbråten's had to have that more leadership, responsibility type of role with whether it's C. Larsen or Kvilla or Amundsen to the side of him. And you can't underestimate the benefit of having a left-footed central defender on the pitch.
Yeah.
Which he is. So I think for all of the plaudits Glimt have had, not just this year, but in the last few years, I think he's someone that certainly deserves more credit than he's been given, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair. What about your 5th place?
Well, my 5th was Breivik, so I'm going to hop over him because we've described him.
Talked about him.
Just to clarify my list, because I feel like I need to just clarify. I always have a bit of another angle to it. So my sort of list is based on, of the games we've played this season, who are the players that have stood out that aren't necessarily ones that you would say, right, we need to stop him or stop him.
Yeah.
But have such an important say to how the team functions. So we talk about Højbråten there with his leadership, the fact left-footed, and the fact he's been the mainstay in the back 4. Breivik we've discussed in terms of that he's a very good footballing brain and keeps Molde ticking. So my number 4 is actually Solomon Owusu from Odd.
Okay.
And the reason I say him is because he has to essentially play 2 positions in every game. and does both brilliantly.
Yeah.
So he has to play in this sort of middle of a back five central defender without the ball, and then has to step forward and be the anchor when they have the ball, which requires a huge amount of, firstly, game intelligence and understanding in terms of when to step up, when to step down, understanding of how to circulate the ball, because he is the base of the play for odds, and then to be able to have the engine to cover as much space as he does. I think it's been extremely noticeable, the games that Odd have struggled in most have been games that he hasn't played in. And I think that is, he's not, he makes mistakes. The first goal against the Alderson, I think it was away, he gets out muscled on the wing and they go in and score. So he's not picked free.
Yeah.
But I certainly think that he is more important to Odd than a Jetovic or Bjørntoft or Ruud or Volta in goal, because of the fact he has to play two positions.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. He is one of those players that I think, as you said, will get overlooked because he's not a player that's going to grab the headlines in any game. But yeah, having that sort of hybrid role, which I think a lot more players in the league have than is maybe often acknowledged, because a lot of these times, so earlier on in the season with Rosenborg, for example, when we were still trying to figure out our best formation, how we're going to approach attacking phases compared to defensive phases, we had Berkey in the side a lot more, and there's on notable, on many occasions he was sort of like being midfield when we're attacking, drop back into defense when we're defending, and it just, in that case, it didn't work because he's not a defender, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, he is not a centre back, especially not in the back three. It does not work at all. But I think you do have those players that, when you're attacking and when you're defending, you're going to line up differently. It's not like, on FIFA or Football Manager where you put your formation as 5-3-2 and that's what you play for the entire game. You are going to have players that will occupy and play different roles within the same games. And I think, as you said, Owusu is a very, very good example of that. Fourth for me is a player that I hope you can agree with, Tom, Vetleskievic. I think he is one of the best left centre backs in the league. And I don't think that's been hyperbolic at all. I don't think he gets talked about enough. I very rarely see his name online. I very rarely see even HamKam fans talking about him. I think he's exceptional. I would take him at Rosenborg tomorrow. As you know, I've banged on about him all season to you, on a regular basis. I think he's a brilliant player. He does not get the credit that he deserves. It's just his composure on the pitch, his attitude is insane. And we talk about Kudasai being this leader of men and being this big stoic figure. Shkevic's one of those guys that goes, okay, that's fine. You can do that, but I've got your back. Don't worry about it. I've got your back. And he's the wall behind Kudasai a lot of the times. And I think just in your defense, when you have him line up with Kudasai, you're thinking, okay, let's attack the right-hand side, of that defense, because we ain't getting in on that side. So for me, I think he's really, really good. For HamKam, for example, he's been dribbled past fewest times, 6 times. He's completed the most passes into the opposition half for HamKam, 329, more than any other player. Second most accurate passes completed for his team. Second most clearances for his team, 77. Third most for interceptions, 25. So for HamKam, his importance is absolutely huge. And I just feel like Kudasai is one of those players that deservingly gets the plaudits and attention, but I do feel like Shkievic isn't praised enough for his contribution. And I think he's one of those players, as you said, for this season in particular, Shkievic's been turned in my head. Whenever I've seen HamKam play, I'm like, who was? Oh, yeah, it's him. Yeah, it's Vetla, all the time. And I think he's a brilliant, brilliant player, and he deserves a lot more recognition than what he's got, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's still got room to grow as well.
Yeah.
I think, we were all excited that, we have Shkievic, who only actually started playing as a centre defender last season. He was actually a midfielder before that. We played HamKam as our first game as Blink manager, and he played at the bottom of the midfield until I think it was 25 minutes, and then the left central defender was getting roasted by our right winger and got booked, so he got hooked after 25 minutes from Sheffield, and then they put Vetner out on the left, and they won the game comfortably. But we were a little bit excited to see how he dealt with the physicality and the different challenges that come with playing at a high level. And so far, he's managed most things very, very well, with still, as we say, room to grow and room to improve even further. And I think as well, he's realizing it himself now. I think that was the other side. I think before he wanted to do things his way, and that's not a negative, but more of a belief in his own abilities. You see, he's good on the ball. He wants to play ball, as I call it.
Yeah, he does.
But even the game he played against the Av on Sunday, I thought he had all three central defenders had very good games for different reasons. I think for him, he had that balance very well between, okay, when can we play through? When can we play back? When do we play over? When do we switch to play? He made a lot of good decisions on the ball. Plus the fact he was very active in terms of when to press, and he defended the box very, very well. So I thought he had a good game on Saturday, and as you say, he'll be important for us the rest of the season, and it helps as well. He's from Lillehammer, which is 45 minutes away, so he's a local guy.
Yeah, and he's 22, and he plays like he's 30 in terms of the way that he approaches these games. You very rarely see him like grinning or joking or smiling on the pitch. He's just very, very connected in that game, and he just. I was amazed when I found out how young he was. I thought he was older because of his attitude on the pitch, and I think having someone like that in your defense is a very, very calming influence for the rest of the team. You're going to get, when I was in Hammer for the Glimp game, which you should have won by half time, by the way, you had so many chances, it was annoying. But that game, it was just Hassan, like, shouting his head off all the time, like controlling everything. It's just shouting here and there, here and there, here and there. Very, 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 very different approach. But I was noticing, the rest of the team obviously buoyed by that. It's a little bit different in his mentality and approach to the game. And I think that's probably why Kurosai gets a bit more recognition as well, because he's just more vocal. He's just, he's just a little bit louder. And, again, he is a quality player, but, in terms of being underrated, undervalued, I think Shkevik is absolutely that. What's your number 4, James?
Someone who I thought had a good game this weekend, both ends of the pitch, Besim Serbicic for Ålesund. Won 75% of his duels this week, made 8 recoveries, played 6 successful long balls. I thought he had a great game there, and was glad to see that the fantasy points for once agreed with me. It's never a perfectly reliable measurement, as we know, but it's always nice to have a bit of backup. On the season as a whole, he's up there for statistics, 2nd for interceptions in the league, 6th for accurate long balls, and he's another person who's just a mainstay in a back line which does tend to shuffle around. And I think he's someone that they can rely upon week in, week out. Obviously, Ålesund's defense isn't one of the best in the Eliteserien, but I think it would suffer a lot more without him in there.
Yeah, I think the issue with Serbicic is obviously we had him for a bit, didn't really seem to work. I was getting up his stats because I wanted to see how many games he actually played for us, and it was 11.
Yeah.
So he played 11 times for us before going out on loan, and then then another 8 games after that. Then went into the reserves, 7 games there. So he's really struggled to make an impact at Rosenborg. So it's nice to see that he's gone to Ålesund and obviously looks competent for them. I just think for our system, something wasn't working for whatever reason. I don't know what his reputation is like in Norway. I imagine it's a little bit spotty, Tom, because obviously he didn't really make it at Rosenborg, but I think his quality is quite apparent, but it just didn't seem to click,
It was an interesting one in terms of how he was perceived in Norway, because obviously there was times last year when Henriksen began playing as a centre defender, and then there was 2 there was two central defenders that weren't playing then. One was, I think, Rolzvik, and one was Serbic. And no one could quite understand why neither, or what was the reason for them not to be playing. So I think it's one of those where he probably needs to go to a club like Alderson to kind of know he was going to play and prove his point. And he's obviously done that. I think, you know, was he the one that gave away the penalty as well at the weekend?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's still elements that he can improve, but I think, like you say, he's definitely him and Follman and Anderson as a back three have worked really well for Alderson this year on the whole.
So number 3 into our top threes now. Move it along a little bit quicker. Sander Cartum, as obviously we've talked about, he was brilliant for Kristiansund at the weekend. But there's a lot of elements to his game which make him stand out to me. He's not a one-trick pony whatsoever. So for Kristiansund, he's probably been their most important player for this season. When we're talking chances created, 26 key passes this season, 3 big chances created, 5 assists. That puts him in the top 3 for all of those KPIs for his club. He's got a couple of goals as well. Pretty decent at moving the ball around. We'll go on the odd dribble here and then. But I think one of the things that of his game that isn't talked about enough is how much he wins the ball back. He doesn't give it up. If there is a challenge to be made, if there's some sort of duel to be had, you know, he's winning that ball back, and he actually ranks second in the league for ground duels. So he's actually won 115 ground duels this season so far. That typifies his play. He is a terrier. Whenever he's got the ball, he's wanted to do something with it. Whenever he doesn't have the ball, he wants to get it back. And he's one of those players that I think he would fit into probably more systems in this league than the majority of other people that we're going to be talking about or that we'll mention.
Yeah.
I think he's one of those players. And, you know, there's not a chance in my mind, unless it's something like personal or something agreed with the club or whatever, that he's at Kristiansund next season. He is not. And if Kristiansund get relegated, there is no chance in hell that he should stay in the Obosh. He needs to be in the Eliteserien. I think he's so good. I think he's absolutely good enough to be in this league, and he's shown that this season. And it's just one of those names that I just very rarely see mentioned or talked about, and I've just never understood why.
Yeah, I mean, just to hijack your pick, my third was also Sander Cartum.
Yeah.
Recently, I think he's been talked about more, at least in the fantasy circle, just because he's got more direct goal involvements. He's got 2 goals and 5 assists in his last 8 games, but that's not something we've been seeing from him all season. It shows that he has those attributes to be able to create good chances. He's confident on the ball, but he does, as you rightly say, have a very diverse skill set. He's 12th for completed dribbles in the league. He's 3rd for tackles. And as you said, he's 2nd for ground duels won. He's doing everything all over the pitch, very diverse skill set. And yeah, until recently, I've barely heard him mentioned all season. So definitely finally getting some of the credit he deserves, even if not as much as he probably should be getting. Tom, how about you?
My third pick is a little bit, it's not based off what we found at the weekend, but my third pick is Norheim in Yav. And the reason I think he's underrated is because I think people just think he's this big mountain of a man who just heads things and kicks things and that's that. I don't think it's an over exaggeration to say that if he had not been on the pitch for half the games this year that Yav played, then Yav would have 0 points. Because he is an absolute monster in the air. He glues everything together in the team. He's got a very good left foot. He's much better on the ball than people I think give him credit for. Extremely good in the air, good at reading situations, very clever, knows he's not the quickest and puts himself in positions. But I think because the Ivs have struggled as much as they have this year, I just don't think he's got any plaudits for it at all.
Yeah.
And
he's an easy target.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think that it's no, for me it's no dissimilar to what you said about Carlton, that if and when Yaiv are relegated, then I can't see him being there next year.
yeah, yeah,
And I think it's just, as I say, whether he's underrated, I don't know, but I don't think he's been given enough plaudits for how important he's been for that Yaiv team
yeah.
because of where Yaiv are right now.
Yeah, and that's
Mm.
just that's how you infer the idea of what underrated is in terms of their contribution to the team, in terms of their contribution in the league relative to other players in similar positions. I think Norheim is one of those players that, yeah, as you rightly say, for their clubs, definitely deserves more credit than what they've got, and also as well as one of those players that you think, okay, he could play for a better team than Yev, relatively easily. Um, Onto our top two picks. Tom, you already gave yours earlier, didn't you? Yeah. I'm going to go with mine, Berkurisa. Now, I think I have mentioned him to you, Tom, quite a few times this season, and I don't know. And this is a question that I really have been waiting to ask you in person. Well, as close to in person as we're going to get. Um, what is his reputation in Norway, especially this season for Molde? Because I think him being moved to left centre back is a stroke of genius. I had my reservations at the start of the season. I was like, really? Okay, we're going to bring him in from being a fullback into this position where he's in a back three like that. He's been sensational. And I know I talk about Shevik being fantastic. I think Risa, that is his position. He looks so much more natural there to me. I mean, he's good as a left back as well, but he just hasn't. He's barely put a foot wrong. He's barely put a
Oh,
foot
his
wrong.
reputation is good here. There's
Yeah,
no question his reputation is good here. And
but
I think he was.
in his new position, is it still holding up?
I mean, I think it's starting to be, again. We talked earlier about Breivik and how he doesn't get the plaudits because he's got people like Ericsson who's been bought for big money, and
Yeah,
Wolf Eichel and those guys ahead of him. And I think it's a little bit the same with Risa, that I think a lot of focus has been on Eric Haugen this year. I think he's
yeah,
been very, very good.
he has been quality.
Um,
Yeah,
and Tiedemann as well, I think, has given them something different.
yeah,
So I think there's been a lot more focus on those two because they're new,
yeah,
because they were signed in the winter, and everyone's just sort of gone, okay, they're new. And then the whole research changing position has kind of gone a little bit under the radar because
mm,
he was there from before.
yeah.
But I think he's starting to get the plaudits now because, as you
Good.
say, that he's a very, very good football player.
Yeah,
I think is right what you say. I think in a back four he would play the left back. I don't think he can play the central defender as a two,
yeah,
but I think as a back three he is perfect for
yeah,
that role.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. You see, because I think Tino Hansen, when he was available for a free, I was like, Rosenborg, let's go get him. And to my knowledge, we weren't even linked with him. And I was like, why the hell aren't we trying to get Tiedemann Hansen? He was amazing for Haugesund when he was there, and he slot into that back three perfectly. So yeah, he's done a fantastic job at Molde. And I think, as you say, he's new. He's a shinier player than Risa. So yeah, I think he's probably stood out more because of that. But yeah, I think we can't underestimate the fact that Risa's been trusted with this new position, and he's taken to it perfectly, in my opinion. James, you're number two.
Yeah,
Who you
my
going
number
with?
two, someone that's already been mentioned by yourself, is Ibrahim Aj of Lillestrøm. Fifth for key passes this season, second for crosses completed. And his crossing statistics surprised me, given that I often see him roaming around central areas of the pitch as well as these wide positions. Like, he's got more than double the crosses of Heinz, Volem, Ersson this season. He's got more crosses completed than the two Molde wingbacks combined. Just surprised me there, like, to see that he's doing that and contributing all over the pitch. But yeah, I think he's one that's not talked about enough. I think when Lillestrøm did have their purple patch, a lot more of the eyes were on Orson, and just like Ibrahim Aj just doesn't get the credit he deserves. And he's great on the ball as well. His dribbling, his intent on the ball, he's always looking to move the ball forwards. And I think he's one that's definitely not spoken about enough.
Yeah.
If it's okay with you boys, I'll head straight to my number one.
Yeah, go for it.
It's another pick down a similar route to Norheim Serbicic in a relatively poor defence, but someone who makes all the difference is Jesper Tyre at Sandefjord. Now, obviously, Sandefjord defence, again, not one of the better ones in the league, but without Jesper Tyre, I think it would be a much, much worse story. Some of his statistics this season are ridiculous. Top for clearances, top for accurate long balls, second for aerial duels won, and tops for blocks per 90 minutes. Like, to have so many things to be number one in the league for is just crazy to me. And I think that he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And another one that I'd be surprised to see playing in the Obos next season if Sandefjord do end up going down.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players that will probably avoid the drop. And he's actually one of the players that we mentioned. Really, I can't remember when it was, Tom. You singling him out as a player that you think is a good shout for goals in fantasy. Yeah,
It
Yes.
was the
scored like
I
8
believe
goals last
the
season or
most
something.
I think it was mentioned in the most listened podcast in your library.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
yeah.
if that's still the case or not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
But yeah, he scored a lot of goals in August last year. I don't think he scored as many this year, but I think that's not only his fault. But yeah, as I say, I think it's a difficult thing to stand out as a central defender in a team that's conceding as many goals as they are at the minute.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's very easily to miss out on the players that are doing so. Like, when a team is performing badly in defense, conceding a lot of goals, it doesn't necessarily mean that their defense is bad across the board. Like, doesn't mean that there's not a standout performer in there that's making a difference and making sure it's not even worse.
Yeah,
Someone that comes straight to my mind is Joachim Andersen when he was at Fulham in the Prem. Absolutely brilliant player, finally getting some of the recognition he reserves at Palace. But that gives me a very similar vibe to him.
Mm.
And to see those players moving up when their team's moving down is something that I think's thoroughly deserved, and love
Yeah.
to see it.
Who's your number one, Tom?
Right, I have to say who my one was going to be, and that was Jurman Orson from Lillestrøm, because I feel like people just see him as this guy who shouts a lot and sort of is a bit of a luxury player. Where actually I think he's a brilliant technical footballer that's just been hampered by injuries and perhaps not being appreciated for what he can do, and just sort of been told what he can't do.
Yeah.
But I decided he was perhaps firstly a little bit old, secondly he's captain of the team, and thirdly I think he's had more plaudits this year, so I left him to one side. So my number one is Magnus Newton. The little fun story with him is that I played against him from the under-19s for Bodø/Glimt in a cup quarter final in 2018, and he was a midfielder who I would use the nickname metronome with him. That he would just sort of play would just develop through him. So when it was relaxed, he'd be the one that would play side to side, and then when he felt it was right, he would break the line or play longer, or would really change the tempo of the game. And I think he's taken that. He went on loan to Ullskis at the start of last year, did okay, but I wouldn't say stood out in a struggling Skisa side. But from when he's gone back to Lillestrøm last summer, I know he was bought from Rostov, or by Rostov and then loaned back. But for me, he is the most important signing Lillestrøm have made this year, because everything that is good from Lillestrøm goes through him. And even to the point now, he's been playing wing back because they've had obviously Matthews in the middle with the Finnish guy Kainen. He's been playing more, but I think his importance to the side is just by the fact he's playing wing back and he's doing really well. And I don't know statistically how he sits in terms of assists and whatever, but I just get the feeling that he is the one that makes that team tick.
Yeah, I think being heavily involved in multiple parts of Lillestrøm's game is what he stands out for. Because Orson will have more assists, and if we look at the stats here, I've just got them up now. Key passes very, very similar, 3 between them in Orson's favour. Big chances created, 8 for Orson, 5 for Knutsen. But then you look at total passes played and involvement in that sense, and Knutsen's like double whatever Orson
Yeah.
has. So he is helping creatively. He's a very creative force, but he's also a player that you can rely on to just do the bread and butter a little bit more as well. Whereas Orson, you're more like, okay, you're there for the final pass. Whereas Knutsen's there for the first pass and the third pass
Yeah.
and the final pass. That's the kind of player that he is. I'm a huge fan of Knutsen, and he was going to be in my list until I found out that he was in your list. And that's not to, throw a hissy fit. It's just let's talk about more players if we can, So yeah, I think he's a quality player, and I agree with you. I think when he went, I was like, that looks like a decent signing, and this season it's clearly been the case that he has been a quality signing. He is one of my favorite players in the league, and as you say, I don't see anybody talking about him ever. And this season he's been brilliant.
He was in my top 10 shortlist as well, so I'm not surprised to see him there at all. Like, at least if he's not getting the recognition if he's not getting the recognition he deserves in the league, then at least he's getting it here.
Yeah. My number one should come as no surprise to James, maybe not to Tom. I don't know. Maybe you haven't kept up with my Twitter over the last couple of years. One of the players that I think is out and out by far. Now, I'm saying this because I imagine it's the case, right? I think he's so overlooked whenever we talk about quality players in the league. And again, it's one of those situations where you look at Norheim, at Yev, that sort of thing. Kristiansund at Haugesund. My God, what a player. I want him at Rosenborg like yesterday. I really, really rate him. This season, he's had a weird role in the team as well. It'll drop back a little bit more defensively, be in the midfield. He was sensational for Haugesund last season. Like, statistically speaking, he outplayed Berg, and we talk about how good Patrick Berg was for Glimt last season. Kristiansund was better than him on paper in pretty much every aspect. This season, in terms of performance for Haugesund, tackles, interceptions, accurate passes in the opposition half, ranks number 1. Accurate passes, passing accuracy, ground duels won, and key passes, he ranks number 2. And then even overall as well, no one's completed more tackles than him in the league. He's 5th for interceptions, 5th for ground duels won. He, to me, is one of the most reliable players that exists in Norwegian football right now. And I don't know whether it's his mentality, it's the position that he plays or what, but he never really seems to be spoken about much. I don't seem, like if you're going to Google players in the Eliteserien, you don't get many results back when you type in his name, and I love him. I'm a huge fan, and I really feel like this season should be enough for him to get a bigger move if he wants it. Now, I don't know if that's on the cards for him. I mean, could you see him moving away, Tom, from Haugesund if a bigger club comes in for him, or is he pretty much happy to be there?
I wouldn't say he's happy to be there. I don't think he would move elsewhere in Norway.
No.
I can see him moving abroad, but not anywhere else in Norway. I think, to be honest, a lot will happen around Safiris. Because I can't see Safiris being there either. You talk about him playing a different role. Talk about him playing a different role this year, Kristiansund, than last year. I think a lot of that's been down to Safiris coming into that midfield.
Yeah.
So I think I can't see Haugesund getting both of their 2-star midfielders going at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think Kristiansund is more intertwined to Haugesund than Safiris is. So
yeah,
I think it will come, but I can't see it coming for now. Could he move elsewhere in Norway? Could, of course, but I just don't see it for now. But I've been proven wrong before, so who knows?
Yeah. Well, I hope he gets a bigger move because, I think he deserves it more than anyone in the league. Definitely.
Yeah. He was the closest person to my list who didn't actually make it. And I feel like a part of that might be because I don't realize how underrated he is, because so much of my hearing people's thoughts about the Eliteserien comes from you. So the fact that you talk about him so much probably puts him down as a not so underrated player. But as a whole, yeah, I think he's fantastic.
I just think this season I was a little bit concerned, as you say, the way that Haugesund are lined up a little bit different. I was thinking, is he going to have the same impact? Absolutely. Hasn't changed. He's that kind of player. He's just, doesn't seem to stop. Right, we've gone over the allotted recording time that I had us down for. So if we've got any final thoughts, I mean, we haven't even talked about Vålerenga, Layuni, Dikko. Tom, you pointed out last week's Gutteprat that, who cares if Saru is gone? You got Dikko to step up. And this week he did exactly that. Comes in with a couple of assists, he's played a blinder there. And I think next season he looks, ready to just come into that side when Saru leaves.
I should do it as a job,
Yeah. It's almost like you should be involved in football, like professionally or something. It's almost like something here, that other people maybe don't know. Yeah. But yeah, him and Layuni have been, great in recent games. And I think that Vålerenga win, I saw it coming. I thought 3-0. That's back-to-back 4-0 home wins for Vålerenga now. And I know we face them this weekend at Lerkendal, so I still think that we're going to win. I can't see us losing that game. I can't see us drawing it either, to be honest. I think we are going to be just too strong. I think we're going to have too much for them. But they're sort of like us, home recently, looking really, really strong. And yeah, I think they're looking good for the third place finish ahead of Glimt, in my humble opinion. I know not everyone here agrees with me, but that's what I'm seeing. And then, I guess other than that, Haugesund did well without Safaris to get the draw against Odd. I thought that might hamper them a little bit. I did have them down as a 1-0 win, but on balance of the game, Odd were definitely up for that. And yeah, Safaris not missed as much as we thought he might be. But
Gengar, things to come.
Yeah, and I think as well with Odd, Gengar starting on the right hand side of that front three with Wallum just behind didn't actually look too bad.
No, it worked well.
So
his goal was again a carbon copy of the one he scored against Sandefjord. Just last line, touch forward, put it in the goal. Questions later.
Is he?
I think.
Sorry, I was going to say, like, is he spoken about much in Norway?
Oh,
is
yeah,
sort of turning heads.
You score 2 goals when you debut in the Eliteserien and then score a goal on your next start.
Yeah,
he's going to lay a note to it. But I think at the minute I think he was described as being Odd's best press player. So I think when they play games that are a bit more open and allow the Odd to go and chase a bit more, like was against Haugesund,
he's going to be involved.
Then I think he'll be involved. I think games like us, where it's a bit more physicality and it's a bit different picture, I think then it's it requires a different skill. But it's certainly a strength for Odd to have it in their ranks, to have the ability to change it on a game by game basis like that. So it won't be the last time he's mentioned this year, I think.
Definitely. Right. I think we're going to leave it there. I don't even know how long we've been recording for, but it looks like maybe 75 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we'll draw a line in the sand there. Thanks for coming on again, Tom. Probably see you next week as well. I'd imagine the way things are going.
It sounds like I'm the only one that's saying yes at the minute. So
well, I haven't asked anybody else.
I'll explain that.
Yeah. Well, I've asked
Anders. You don't need to say that publicly. I'm still not talking to Anders after the Decker ball in Salzburg. So he saved too many of our shots.
After the what? Sorry.
After the Decker ball or Decker ball in Salzburg when we were 1-0 up and weren't 1-0 up for much longer.
Oh, okay.
Saved too many of our shots.
Yeah. Well, we will see what we can do for next week. But yeah, as ever, cheers for coming on. Cheers for chatting. And potentially this week, as we've had no camera issues, we can throw it on YouTube. So yeah, if I'm saying this on
special and everything.
Yeah. Well, if I say this on YouTube, then well, there you go. That's a bit meta for you, isn't it? And yeah, I managed to just throw a bit of wet my hair a little bit and push that back. But yeah, a bit of a thicket. But hey, we're fine with that. Right, yeah, let's leave it there. And until next time, cheers, guys.
Cheerio.